Gerald Oetelaar, countermapping the Blackfoot landscape.
Thank you. All right. What is countermapping? Countermapping is sort of taking and accepting the worldview of traditional people and their understanding of the landscape and how they map their world as opposed to the way we map our world. We start with a grid, we add to that geology, topography, and all of this information comes from experts who have not walked across the land, have studied a little area, and make general little statements thereabout. And then we take that and create a stage, and we place the people on that stage, but those people who are moving across that stage are using our worldview, not theirs. So countermapping involves making oral traditions the basis, the bedrock from which you look at the archaeological record. And to do that, you have to understand the Blackfoot homeland the way they do, the extent of it, the fact that it was created by culture heroes, the fact that there are 3 different worlds which are inhabited by sentient beings. There are interactions happening between and amongst all of these beings, and the beings also influence the weather and other aspects of your life, and you have to be able to interact with them regularly and at different places on the landscape. And all sentient beings, plants, the spirits of plants, the spirits of animals, the spirits of ochre, can travel between worlds and can interact with people in these different worlds. That homeland has been around for a long time, and there are multiple lines of archaeological evidence which substantiate the claims by the Blackfoot people that this has been their homeland since time immemorial. And time immemorial is not all that far back in time. It is something, what, 1189? This is their representation of their world. And you will notice that it consists of a series of lines drawn, and on that there are letters, and they are indicated here as to what they represent. And as you walk toward that landmark, the shape tells you what the name of the place is. The place reminds you of the stories, the songs, and the rituals that are associated with those. Each one of the peaks is an anchor for one of the lines coming down, and each one of the peaks is also a pass through, a landmark for a pass through the mountains, and each one of the peaks is also a way of reaching the upper, middle, and lower worlds. Now, one has to wonder why Fiddler decided to add the word river to each one of the names that the Blackfoot people gave to a place along the river, a place along that line, not the line, okay? And he did that because he was using a Western notion of maps, and at the time that he was moving through this landscape, he was relying very much on the doctrine of discovery. So once you named a river, you now owned all the land that was drained by that river. So by adding the word river, he suddenly made all of this part of the Hudson's Bay landmass. What we are arguing, Joy and I, is that those lines actually represent trails. Well, she's taking care of that. The archaeology of trails, there are a number of studies that have been done on the archaeology of trails. We have my study with Carmen Olson, looking at the trail network in the Calgary area and noting the relationship of archaeological sites. Lindsay's study of the Old North Trail, which she has talked about already. And this is Terry Bullier's study, which he used individual clusters or groupings of teepee rings to sort of note where there was a ford across the river, and you'll notice that there are clusters on either side, and that's because it takes a day to cross a river. So you get there, you camp, the next day you cross the river, camp on the other side, and then move down the way. For the Blackfoot people, and we've heard that from the people, the Blackfoot yesterday, it is they use their teepee as an understanding of the broader landscape out there. And essentially, this teepee, that's the middle world, that's the upper world. Here we have the same representation. Every morning, the head of the household takes a coal from the fire, places on the altar, adds a little bit of sweetgrass or alpine fir, and the smoke from that altar carries the message along the poles from the middle world to the upper world. Ryan Heavyhead cleverly noted that that was not really the way that they envisioned the landscape. Actually, you had to turn the map around and make it look like a teepee. So every year during the annual Sundance ritual, the people leave the middle world, follow the trails from the middle to the upper world, and there sort of ask for help from the sun to renew their world, their landscape. The homeland is also viewed as an archive. It's a series of places linked by trails, and people move from one place to the other. The places remind them of the names remind them of the stories. It's very much like someone going to an archive, looking through the file folders with the one tab that has the name of the person that they're wanting to look at, and then you get the file, the contents of the file to look at. The narratives themselves are codes of ethical conduct toward the land, the resources, and the people. These are their strategies for survival. At the same time, the places, the narratives, and the ceremonies establish continuity between the spirits, the ancestors, the living community, the current community, and the future generations. Movement is necessary to actually enable the transmission of that information from one generation to the next. The entire landscape is necessary for you to fulfill all of the obligations, and failure to do so will end up creating problems. The Old North Trail has a series of places along it, and this map is the only one that has two lines, and the second line here is a representation of the Old North Trail. Here are the different peaks, and those peaks are helpful when you're moving in this area in the winter, when there are blizzards that can cause serious concerns. Each slide that you will see from now on will have a narrative about one of the places. This is the narrative about the first marriage. And here are a series of place names along that Old North Trail, one of which Lindsay pointed out in her earlier talk, but there are a whole series of them. The winter is the time when you're presenting or visiting people to coordinate activities along the mountains. And in this particular case, during these visits, that's when the Napi stories can be told. And the Napi stories, most of them are associated with creative acts. The narratives of stewardship are represented on the map like this. This is another map, an Akmoki map, and what we're looking at right now is his drawing of this particular trail, which is represented here as a series of named places, each one of which has a very specific name, a name that's a mnemonic. There are springs for they get water. There are managed resources like groves. There are stories associated with them, and there are archaeological sites. Many of the sites along this area, especially right here, where the Grassy Lake Cairn is located, Forbes was actually taken to that site by the Blackfoot, just as he was taken to the old woman's buffalo jump. And that's where he was told that there was another buffalo jump called the new woman's buffalo jump. And it's also where he was informed about Cluny. So Forbes, as a student of William Duncan Strong, the father of direct historical approach, was using that early on in his career and was relying on the Blackfoot. The journey, the movement from the wintering grounds to the summer grounds is together a historical journey, a social odyssey, and a ritual pilgrimage. And again, each slide here has a story. The places here, as Lindsay pointed out, are 1 day apart. And as you're moving with dog and travois. You can make that trek from the mountains to Medicine Hat in 32 days. That's not your whole summer. And the other important point here is simply that as you are moving through this area, each place is remembered and the stories are told, and so the information is communicated from one generation to the next. And so the archive that is out there on the landscape is transmitted from one generation to the next in their day-to-day activities. Not, okay, today we're having a lesson on this. No, we are living day to day. This is what we do. You should do the same. Because the resources are there, because our ancestors visited that place, and they told the stories and kept the place alive. The other is Swan's Bill. Again, if you look at that peak, you can see it from Fort Calgary. There are the series of, and we're just including a few of the named places. There's a mess of them all along, okay? So 1 day's travel, you get to the next place. 1 day's travel, you get to the next place. 1 day's travel, and all of them have names. And all of them have, and this here one is an important one for the pass, because the pass across along the Bow River is not following Highway 1 today, it's following Highway 1A, but then you go up the Ghost by Lake Minnewanka site, which is located on the north side. Also, the trail goes on the north side. And Lake Minnewanka has occupations going back 10,000 years. Does that mean the trail was there 10,000 years? I leave that up to you. Social Odyssey, same thing. If you look at this map, look at the little lines coming together from a dispersed winter camp, all going in nested triangles to this major trail. And again, they are drawing these maps for us to let us know that, okay, these peaks are important. These trails are important. These places. And in terms of the social odyssey, the people come together, and as they're moving, they eventually come to these clumps of trees, the groves of cottonwoods. There, they commune with their ancestors. When they finally get to the Sundance ground, all of the different groups have come together for the Blackfoot community, but they're meeting people coming from the other side to celebrate with them. Okay, so it's not that they are enemies, they are working together to keep the entire landscape alive. It's also an economic expedition. Moving forward, this is Kanai voyage. You'll notice it's not a straight line, as is depicted. Again, the places are not always neatly lined up in all cases. And again, these are the places that are visited in succession as described in Kanai voyage, or how the ancient pagan lived. And furthermore, he also provides information on what they did at each one of these places. So his information is different than the information that we got from some other people. And then it's also a ritual pilgrimage. Thunder, when the first sign of thunder appears, that's when you open the thunder medicine by Bullen. When the rivers thaw, that's when you actually open the beaver bundle. And when you finally get to the Sundance ground, that's when you are opening the Natoas bundle. So by opening those bundles, you are renewing them. And at the same time, as you're moving along, you are getting ready by collecting tongues, kill sites. You are getting together, you are also preparing yourself for that performance, and that is some of these little Vision Quest features. And then the sweet pine, and here we have 1 and 2 circle camps, archaeological circle camps. Now, taking off on what Sandy was talking about, the Blackfoot do, and this is Evelyn's research that brought this to my attention, when they pick a plant, they make an offering. When they process the plant and there are leftovers, they take those and put them in the ground with an offering. And when Evelyn did that with her cookum, at the end of 3 years, all of the plants that they had collected, scattered across the landscape, were growing in her backyard. Okay? So, when we come to looking at the Sweetgrass Hills or the Cypress Hills, they are not natural, remnants of Pleistocene forests. Those Rocky Mountain species that are there, they got there because people brought them there. They picked them up in the Mistakis, carried them across the landscape, reverently deposited the remains, and what you have next are the species growing. And so all of the places that the Blackfoot had created that are unusual during their movement across the landscape are today's parks. Police Point is a grove. And this grove had to be, the people in Medicine Hat in the late 1800s said, at what point are we going to take all of those dead people on platforms in these cottonwood trees and give them a decent burial? Not what the Blackfoot people would want. The other is Sweetgrass Hills. The species that are there, they're Rocky Mountain species, just like in the Cypress Hills. And then the mountain parks, as Lindsay pointed out, they're the result of burns, winter burns, not summer burns. They are done in the winter. The fescue grasslands, not natural, created by the people who were actually managing this landscape. Finally, all of this stewardship, all of this very strong relationship between the people and the land came tumbling down at the time of contact. So you got inland trade. The first thing they did, they set up their trade centers right on top of aggregation centers. Chesterfield House, right where the Sundances were. Okay, and then David Meyer along the North Saskatchewan has demonstrated the same. The second, the diseases. They really created havoc on the populations. Then there was a systematic, not unintentional, a systematic destruction of the bison herds to control the populations in the area. And the Blackfoot places are appropriated by the white people, many of them given English names or called according to some important individual. And so as a result of them then being placed on reserves, they no longer were able to have access to the places, to visit the places, to remember the stories, to perform the traditional rituals. Got it. To renew the land, the people, the resources. They gradually lost the landscape archive, those stories, and the associated strategies for survival. And with that came sort of an unraveling of the social fabric of the Blackfoot communities. Fortunately for us, they have been resilient many times. They have maintained their language. They have kept the stories, but what they don't have is where those stories fit on the landscape, okay? What countermapping is going to allow us to do, if they remember the stories and we are able to put the name of the place on the map of the world today, our hope is that we will be able to help them put the stories back on the landscape in a sequence that is consistent with. So countermapping is one of the ways that we can help past and present Blackfoot communities gain, again, a way of perceiving their world and maybe helping us understand what their world is like. Thank you.